All right. You're listening to the Sober Awakenings podcast, a show designed to aid you in the journey of recovery and encourage you to embrace living in states of enlightenment and presence. The Sukina method of recovery is a 12-step program from an Islamic point of view. Whether you are struggling in the midst of pain or on the path of recovery, these sober awakening conversations and interviews are here to be a reminder and record of the power of permanent transformation. This second episode has been a long time in the works. I actually sat down with our guest back in June of last year. It was a stark turning point in the year. You know, many communities were just coming out of months of pandemic lockdowns, and then there was the death of George Floyd. I live in Portland, Oregon, and in the months following there were riots and clashes between protesters, police, and federal officials nearly every week. It was the headline on international news, and I felt at the time, and for a while after, that there was a need for voices like mine to take a step back and not only provide space for others to speak up, but take time to listen and reflect. It is now 2021, and we are wrapping up Black History Month. Last week, I had the honor to get to do some special programming with KBOO, our local radio station, which involved producing an episode in memory of the 56th anniversary of the death of Malcolm X. Malcolm was not one who was afraid to stand up to oppression and called out systemic abuses. This courage is the great power of recovery. It is a high state, and one that many of us strive for, but are not at yet. I say this as I want to preface this episode's interview by acknowledging that this discussion today is about abuse. And that is not an easy subject for everyone to listen to. Take this episode in stride. Pause it where you need to. Reach out if you need help. And most importantly, listen, reflect, and permit your heart to heal. Here is Sober Awakenings, Episode 2. Welcome, Ptissem. This is our second episode, I believe, of the Sober Awakenings podcast. I started this podcast as an extension of my recovery coaching program. You also do coaching, and we actually met through coaching, which was awesome. If you don't mind, I'm going to tell a little bit of that story. We were both in Mamoun Yusuf's coaching programs. My first one was one of his January productivity weekend sessions. And I was live streaming in from West Coast here in America. You were actually, I think, running part of the live stream for that session, which was awesome. And yeah, it was great. I'd been a fan of Mamoun through his podcast, through reading his book as well, Inside the Soul of Islam, and just was really able to get connected and had a blast at that program. And we've had a great time in coaching sessions with him for well over a year now. And it is a pleasure to have you on the program. Welcome. And
thank you for having me here with you today.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure and an honor.
Alhamdulillah. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into, I guess, the coaching world? it's a bit of a story, and I know you've shared it in some of my moon sessions before, but yeah, let's just start from the beginning because most of our listeners here probably aren't familiar.
Yeah, okay. No worries at all. It's kind of similar to you in that you had heard of Mamoon before, or, on your own journey, like reading his emails, listening to his audios at the time, his podcast. But yeah, for me at the time, as I was reading all of his stuff and slowly, you know, becoming a fan of this guy that would write these really lovely spiritual emails, the kind of stuff that really spoke to me. But it was at a time in my life that was really difficult and challenging. I was in an abusive marriage, which I ended up fleeing from with a 3-year-old, and I was 5 months pregnant at the time. I had to move into a women's refuge for a good 5 months or so until they housed me literally days before my second son was born. And then where they housed me, although I was like super grateful to be housed and have a fresh start for myself, I happened to be living right next to a group of drug dealers. So for a good year or more, I had another challenge on top of everything else that I was going through. I had a newborn that didn't sleep. I was adjusting to life by myself with 2 children to look after. And although I was happy to no longer be in an abusive marriage, it took a lot of getting used to this new life I had. And then the added problem of having the neighbors from hell, keeping me up all night, just all kinds of crazy goings on next door. By the time that I officially filed for divorce, which was a good 18 months after I left the refuge, or after I physically left him that day, it took a good 18 months for me to find the confidence and the courage, I guess, to really get to a point where I felt like, yeah, I'm definitely going to file for divorce, because I was, so caught up with so many fears about what would happen if I took that final step and, finish things for good. So once I did, life was still super challenging, but thankfully I had a realization that, if I was going to go it alone and I was going to do this single mother thing by myself and raise my kids as best I could, I really couldn't stay in the emotional state that I was in, because I was so resentful. I was, beating myself up for choosing the wrong guy to marry, and that it was my fault that things had turned out this way. I was resentful of people that had happy marriages and had 2-parent families. When my kids would play up, which they do, I had a newborn who was, then a year old, plus, a 4-year-old. And if they played up, I would take my anger out on them. Like, why are you making mommy's life more difficult? I've already got all of this stuff going on. And I knew that it was, it wasn't fair on them. So, and, it wasn't fair on me either. But the main worry was that I needed to sort my head out so that I could be, so that I could move forward and be a good single mom and a positive role model for them. And that's when I got in touch with Mamoon. I bought a couple of programs of his to help me figure out how to move forward. And they helped me get to that point where I felt confident enough to tell my, ex-husband that that's it. We're not going to get back together. There is no chance of us rekindling things, and I want a divorce. So the programs I studied of his, and I had a conversation with him on the phone, really helped, push me to make that decision. And then I made an event of his, a live event of his, against all logistical odds. With 2 kids in tow, I was able to make that event. And then I signed up to a year's coaching program with him and never looked back since.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, our stories in a way are slightly similar, even though we're on different sides of the pond, as they say. Um, I went previously through a divorce myself. Alhamdulillah, I didn't have to worry about the kids issue. But, I think I'm going to definitely be asking you some questions here, as maybe looking for coaching advice myself during the course of this. Just because, obviously I recently got married myself.
Yeah, very
And
beautiful.
having kids has always been a dream of mine. So, uh, I know parenting, regardless of whatever the situation is, whether it's as a single parent, whether it's in a healthy relationship, or with all of the things that we have in the world right now in terms of like coronavirus pandemic, 2020 has been kind of a crazy year. So
Yeah.
we don't know what life's going to throw at us. You know, I'll get to some of that stuff I think here later. When you were going through all of your struggles, what was it that actually drove you to pursue help? And what caught your interest with Mamoon particularly?
I think finally seeing things clearly in my marriage, seeing things for how they were, being able to, see that, okay, the relationship's dead, you know, it's going to, that's it. I'm going to file for divorce. Inevitably, you've now got a new start in life. And I really didn't like what I was seeing. I didn't like how I was being. And now that I was out of that limbo phase that seemed to last forever, where I didn't know if I should stay or go, or, how do I make this decision? Once I made that decision, it was almost like, well, now what? Are you just going to stay in this state forever? Like, you're out of limbo now. And I kind of justified to myself that why I would have felt, like I was on an emotional roller coaster then. But now you're making a really big decision. You're deciding to go it alone and to be a single parent. And these kids don't deserve to have shouty, miserable mum. Like, I think that was the main driver. The children, I just thought it's not fair on them because, they're beautiful, innocent kids and they're getting the worst of me and I'm taking out my frustrations on them. So I just remember thinking, I need to sort my head out. If this is what I'm going to do, I kind of need to take a bit of responsibility and try and sort myself out. And I think, at times when we're struggling, you always remember a time in the past where you were at peace and you were happy and you were content. And I always remember, when I was younger, like always being quite a spiritual person, always feeling that connection with Allah. And I felt that that had gone, and I really wanted that part of me back. And I think that's what naturally led me to Mamoon, because obviously over the years, he'd been in the background in my inbox and I was reading his stuff and I felt connected to what he wrote about. So it was natural that when I needed help, he's a life coach, I turned to him first. And it wasn't without its logistical issues and financial issues with signing up to a coaching program like that, because obviously coaching is it's a luxury service, I guess, and for someone in my position it was quite hard to justify spending so much money on myself. But at the end of the day, I followed Allah's guidance, in moments like that where you're just not sure what to do and what's best. You've just got to, subhanAllah, you get signs, Allah, you decide, I'm just going to go one way, and then Allah gently guides you another way. And it's just kind of watching out for that guidance and going down that path and trusting in Allah. And alhamdulillah, it all worked out.
Alhamdulillah. It's beautiful what you're saying about guidance, because I remember back when I was in kind of that searching phase, kind of recognizing that, yeah, I need to do something, but not knowing exactly what to do. This is probably it was definitely a time when Mamoon was kind of still in the windows of things. So I remember making dua, getting connected to other people, and then also finally getting redirected back towards Mamoon, who'd always been kind of waiting there. That's a really beautiful thing that kind of opens us up to realizations of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also the noticing it in the initial decision too, in that your kind of impetus was in the fact that you recognized you could do more for your kids. and you needed to do more in terms of like responsibility and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember having similar thoughts in terms of that, and then also particularly connecting back with aspects of how, you know, when I was a kid, things were a lot easier. It's that fitra, that, you know, it's that innocence that we're all born with, that scholars of our religion talk about. And I know one of the first episodes of Mamoon's Quran for Busy People podcast that I listened to was talking about that exact same thing. And I wasn't even Muslim at the time when I heard it, and I knew it was saying something that was true. That was really powerful.
Yeah.
Tell me
And
about
I had the
your.
same with one of his YouTube videos, which I think I watched before I spent any money on his programs. And it was that same thing. Like the first video, I was like, this guy's onto something. I know he's speaking truth. I've got no idea. Like, I don't understand what he's saying, because he was talking about the inside out paradigm of psychology, which I'd never heard of before. But I just knew, I was like, this guy's onto something. I don't get it, but I know he's speaking truth. And then that's it. You can't leave that alone then. You just want to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the power of truth.
Yeah.
When you hear it, you know, and it resonates with your core, with your soul.
Yeah, 100%.
Tell me a little bit about your first experience there in the live session that you attended with Mamoon, because I know that was really transformative for you, right?
Yeah, it was. And I'm surprised I made it, really, because it was a 3-day event, a live event in London. I don't live in London. I live a good 2 hours drive from London. And like I mentioned, I had 2 very small children. And obviously you can't take children to an event like that. It's all about your own kind of personal reflection and transformation. So you want to be, you know, by yourself if possible. But thankfully, a very amazing friend of mine, who I'll be forever grateful to, knew what I was going through. In that same time period, I lost my dad, Allah yarhamah. And yeah, she was just looking out for me, and she said, you know, listen, if you think this event is going to help you, come to London, bring your children, stay with me, and I'll look after them every day whilst you're at the event. And she really pushed me to take her up on her offer. Were it not for her, I don't know if I'd have been able to make that event. She made it very easy for me to attend. So yeah, thankfully I made the event, and it was great. And Mamoon, he does these events, but he also has year-long coaching programs, which you're aware of. And the year-long coaching programs is where all of the real magic happens, should I say. It's where all of the really, you know, powerful transformation happens, because, you know, we all turn to coaching or self-development or personal development because we've got one specific issue that we want to get figured out. And you can go to a live event like that and get some insights into that little area. And, you know, life can be, you know, improved and life will be better. But what happens in the year-long coaching program that you don't realize at the outset is that you get that area of your life solved and it improves dramatically. But what you don't expect is that all these other areas of your life where you didn't even realize you had issues or beliefs that were holding you back in life, or ways of, you know, your perspective on life, all of that changes. And that's just like, oh wow, you know. So you go in to solve one little problem, and then you go along through the year, and by the end of the year you're just like, whoa, I'm so different to how I used to be in so many amazing ways. Like when you reflect on how much things have changed over that past year of coaching, it honestly, you know, it just brings you to tears. And you've probably seen it on events and recordings where I just can't, you know, contain the emotion, because it's such a dramatic change when so much in your life changes. Like I said, especially the areas where you didn't even think you had an issue, and then suddenly through coaching you get these insights about yourself, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was holding myself back so much, or that I believed this about myself, or that I believed this about other people. And so, not only do you grow as a person and start loving yourself more, your relationships with other people improve too. So yeah, truly transformational in every sense of the word.
That's the beauty of insight and transformation itself, is that, when we even get the smallest seed of it, it will just catapult us into a whole new world of insights and discovery. We talk about how not only is transformation something that we gain through insight, but it's also something that is permanent with us. It's not something that we lose. And this is a beauty of the inside out, the new perspective that one attains. Could you, I know our listeners, some of them are familiar with the coaching method. Some of them may not be familiar with it. If you want to just explain that a bit real quick. I think, I've explained it in the past. Others have as well. It's always good to hear a new voice explain it, because it's just like what we were saying about truth. When you hear truth, it resonates with you, and everyone's going to say it in a different way. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, with the inside out paradigm of psychology, there's no end to how much you can understand it or see it show up in your life. But the fundamental thing with the inside out paradigm of psychology is that it highlights to us that the way we've been living all of these years is, we've basically been living in an illusion. We're 100% aware of our thinking, but we're believing that life works in a way that it doesn't. And that innocent belief that we've been living by is what's responsible for so much of the difficulty we experience in life, the heavy burdens we carry around on our shoulders every day, the overthinking, the anxiety, the depression. And it's all from just a misunderstanding of how we really work. And the inside out paradigm of psychology, it's all about showing us how we already work, how we really work. It's not a new self-development practice that we have to wrap our head around and start implementing and taking, physical action towards every day. It's how we already work. It's the same as somebody teaching you or explaining to you how your physical body works, and you were maybe oblivious to it before, and then suddenly it all starts to make sense. You're like, oh, so that's what my heart does. Oh, okay, that's what my liver is responsible for. And suddenly your physical body makes loads of sense to you. And that's exactly what the inside out paradigm of psychology does when it comes to your psychology. It shows you how you really work compared to how we've innocently been believing all this time and all our lives how we don't work, which is that you experience something, it causes your feelings. Someone does something to you, they cause your feelings. You face a difficult situation, situations causing your feelings. And that's not how it works at all. The inside out paradigm shows us that we're only ever experiencing our own thought in the moment. It doesn't diminish the fact that these things are happening, and in some situations that, they're not right, and we definitely need to put stuff in place to fix those or resolve those situations, but it's separating out how we feel about it's separating out the feelings, and that's coming from thought in the moment, and it can only ever come from thought in the moment, not from everything that we face in life. I hope that explains it. Okay,
it's brilliant, mashallah. And like I said, I love hearing everyone explain the paradigm from their own perspective, and you never know what it is that's going to catch on to you. And this time, what you were saying about how so often we're looking at the illusion or perspective and thinking we have to do something. And here in the situation that we're talking about so much, we've got the issue of relational collapse, marital collapse. And we've got all the extenuating situations around it, the separation, the legal paperwork, maybe custody issues, all sorts of other stuff going on. I mean, there's potentials for abuses and all sorts of injustice. This is something where we immediately think of, we have to do something. That's often just the first and only concept that comes to mind is, I got to do, I got to do, I got to do. And yet the inside out paradigm is actually revealing to us that that's not necessarily the case. So walk me through how you were able to address these issues for yourself and stay in mental health.
I mean, in terms of, living post-divorce with 2 children, I think what it really helped with was seeing situations separate to how I felt about them. It was, firstly, kind of the big thing for me was becoming aware that that running narrative in my mind, all of the that running commentary that had just always been there my whole life, which I always took to be a part of me, or even just me, there was no separation there. It was like, that running commentary that's going on in my mind is me. And so I took everything that popped into my mind very seriously because that was me. And then learning about the inside out paradigm, learning about what thought actually really was, and understanding how I worked, suddenly made me realize that, oh, okay, that running commentary of sometimes totally nonsensical thinking that I have in my mind isn't me. It's my thinking, and I can ignore a lot of it. It doesn't actually have that power that I believed it had. So there was that awareness of myself, which meant that, my own self-esteem and confidence got loads better because I was suddenly no longer paying attention to all of this made up thinking that I'd carried around for so long about myself, that, I never make good decisions. I'm really weak. I don't stand up to people. I, chose the wrong husband. I this, that, the other. I'm never going to achieve anything in life. Like all of that negative thinking that really kept me in victim mode, I guess. And then I would spend a lot of time reflecting on the past and, oh, I can't believe all of this stuff I had to go through. I can't believe my ex did this to me. Like I didn't deserve any of this. And then I would wallow in that. So becoming really aware of that and being able to break free from it and, drop a lot of that really unhelpful thinking meant that going forward and living my life, I didn't have that heavy burden on my shoulders. And also when it came to dealing with my children, because I was way more aware now of the role that my own thinking was playing in everything, whenever they did something, I could see the issue separate to how I felt about it. So if they were misbehaving, it was no longer, you're misbehaving and you're making me feel angry. Like I'm angry because you've done this. That no longer made sense. So it meant that I was dealing with issues a lot more, calmly, a lot more logically. It didn't mean that I just ignored everything because, I'm feeling my own thinking. So it's fine if they misbehave, or it's fine if they talk back or do something wrong or hurt each other. No, it meant that I was now able to deal with these issues, and not just in parenting, with everything, without my feelings getting involved, really. We always hear people say, oh, put your feelings to the side and deal with the situation as logically as you can. And that can sometimes be really hard to do, but it's not hard to do when you have the inside out understanding, because you really see a lot more clearly the role your own thinking is playing in everything and how unhelpful it can be at times too.
So it sounds like the simplest way to describe it maybe is that you're able to now enter into decision making from a position of strength.
Yeah, I think that strength comes from seeing things more logically. You know, a lot of the times when we're resolving or trying to resolve issues, especially in relationships, what we're really resolving is how we feel. You did this and you hurt my feelings. You did this and you upset me. And we're trying to fix the feelings, and we hold on to stuff unnecessarily. You know, we hold on to them for an unnecessarily long amount of time because we're waiting until we feel better to forgive someone. And so the argument can really focus on that. And that's really, it's not the way it works, and it's not going to fix the issue. You might get temporary relief, you might feel better, you know, temporarily, but because your feelings are always coming from the way you're thinking, all it takes is for your thinking to change, and then you can feel whatever your thinking is in that moment. So with this insight, with this understanding, seeing the role that your thinking is playing in everything, knowing that it's only coming from thought in the moment, and it's an inside job, means that you're no longer trying to fix that when it comes to these situations and, you know, arguments with, you know, in your relationships. That's not what you're focused on. You're focused on the issue itself, which is actually a lot easier to deal with when you're not trying to resolve your feelings too. You know, with the feelings out of the picture, it's just, okay, let's focus on the issue. And you really just, you know, laser focus on what actually needs to get done here.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Okay, you've got my mind running with questions about all of these issues surrounding divorce and being a single parent, and honestly, just issues of, you could say, relational difficulty as well. I want to ask them, but I want to also kind of get there first, in a way, logically. I think it would be good to ask you these questions after developing who you are as a person now, because you obviously have your own coaching program.
Yes.
How did that start? What was the impetus for that?
I think, like, I feel that going through that year of coaching, and even before the year was up, having so many of my limiting beliefs about myself drop away, about what I could and couldn't achieve, about what I could and couldn't do, meant that suddenly there were a lot more possibilities and opportunities in life that perhaps I hadn't considered before. So when the opportunity came up to, you know, train in this area, you know, and continue with Mamoon, learning about the inside out paradigm, but training in his coaching academy at the same time, then it was, you know, a really exciting opportunity. Also, because I'd experienced firsthand that it was completely possible to come out of an abusive marriage, out of such a hard aftermath of that, of, you know, finding my feet and getting used to life alone with 2 children, with all of the challenges that came with that, being able to come out of that and be totally fine and, you know, and happy and content. You know, I remember my mum and distant family members that maybe didn't see me every day, they would always ask about me, is she okay? Is she okay? Because the expectation was that I would not be okay after going through what I'd gone through. But I would always say to my mum, like, Mum, tell them I'm good, you know, I'm fine. Like, divorce doesn't mean misery and that it's going to take X amount of years before you'll feel better again. Like, during that year, everything changed and I was really happy. So seeing that was another push, because I thought, wow, imagine how many women are out there that are suffering and, you know, they don't realize that they don't have to, that it doesn't have to be that way. So yeah, that was a big motivation for me as well, to let people know, like, you know, you want to shout it out and let everyone know, oh guys, there's a new way, you don't have to suffer anymore. So yeah, it was yeah, you want to help people and let them know that it doesn't have to be that way, that they can face any difficult challenge in life, and get through it, and it doesn't have to be difficult, and it can be really, really powerful and really transformational, and that's something special that you just want to share.
That's awesome. Logistically, so like, when did you start coaching, and how has it developed for you?
I started coaching in 2017. And to start off with, I was very much focused on women who were, in the same kind of situation that I was in, stuck in an unhealthy marriage or an abusive marriage, not sure whether they should stay or leave. So yeah, a lot of my coaching was helping women like that, sometimes even just become aware that they were in an abusive marriage, because that's the thing. When you spend a long time in an abusive marriage, it's your normal. You don't even realize a lot of the time that you are in an abusive marriage, because the nature of abuse is that you'll experience abuse, and then your husband will spend a few days after that incident being super apologetic, super sweet, super loving, super kind. You forgive him, you get over it, and then you have a period of time which is totally fine. It's not abusive, it's okay. And then the abuser will feel that perhaps you're not sticking to his rules as well as he'd want you to. You're not doing things that he wants you to. He feels that maybe he doesn't have as much control as he'd like. And then the cycle comes full swing, and there'll be another incident of abuse in order to draw you back under his control. So that becomes your normal. And because the incidents of abuse have spaced out quite a lot, maybe there's like a couple of months sometimes between each incident, it's enough time, it's strange, but it's enough time for your brain to just, you forget about it. And then the next one happens, but they feel like isolated incidents. And it's not until you kind of step away and really look at what's going on that you're like, wow, I am in a really abusive marriage. So yeah, a lot of my time was spent helping women to spot these signs and understand that they were in abusive marriages, and what kind of things that they could do to, help that. Because a lot of these women had super low self-esteem, and they felt like it was their fault and that they were doing things wrong, and they just needed to be more patient. So yeah, started off doing that. And then as time has gone on, I've got more and more involved with Mamoon's area of work. So I now work with him as well and coach some of his clients in more general life coaching. So it's been really great, because I've been able to focus on an area that's very personal to me in terms of relationships and abuse, but then also branching out now to work more as a general life coach. So it's great to be able to do both.
MashaAllah. That's absolutely wonderful, and may also Allah reward you and grant you ease and success in the coaching endeavors. I have got to ask some questions, because I had a list and now I think I just doubled it. This is awesome, alhamdulillah. So I was thinking back to when I was going through some terrible relationships in the past, and at the time, and that this obviously has to do with largely living in states of illusory thinking. All of what's going on in my head over and over again is just about what you're talking about, of trying to control the feeling that you're experiencing in the moment, or in the relationship, associating it with the relationship, associating it with the other person. And when you add in the element of abuse into it as well, that is throwing, it's a whole nother elephant in the ballpark. It's how do you help wake up people to the fact that they may be in an abusive situation? because often because you said it's not something that they're even aware of. And, you know, I would find that partly like a frightening thing, perhaps, to come to that understanding.
Yeah, it's it's quite sad in a way, because they're, you know, by the time they reach out to someone like me, they're in a really low place, you know. Not only are they experiencing this abuse, but the abuser has spent so long telling them that it's their fault that they're getting treated this way, and that if only they weren't this, you know, if only they weren't doing this, or if only they were doing that, then I wouldn't be this angry. And it's very much become, it's, the abuser's really good at blaming you for so much. So if, you know, if he gets super angry and lashes out at you over an argument because you decided to go out and meet a friend, he'll try really hard to make it super clear that had you not gone and met that friend, I wouldn't have done this, you know. And so at the beginning, you may not accept that, and you may think, well, no, that's, you know, that's not fair and that's not right. But then you get so used to them being that way that you just start accepting more and more, because it just makes for an easier life to just, you know what, I'm not going to do that thing because I know he's going to get really angry. And so slowly, but ever so slowly, your life changes, you change, you start accepting more. And when you throw culture into the mix as well, there's a load more excuses there to justify what's going on, you know. Arabs are hot-headed, they've got, you know, they get angry quickly. That's just what Arabs are like. I'll always remember, this was after I left my ex, my brother being at the mosque, and the imam at the time said to him, oh, you know, you should encourage your sister to get back with her husband. And then my brother was like, well, are you sure? Because this is what he's like. And the imam said, oh, no, don't worry about that. You know us Arab men, we're all hot-headed, and just, you know, dismissed it as though it's just normal behavior that we should just expect from these types of men from these kinds of cultures. And I, even myself, as someone that was born and raised in the UK, I, for a long time, justified his behavior thinking, oh, he's just, you know, it's just his it's his cultural upbringing, you know, he's jealous because from where he, you know, where he's from in Afghanistan, this is what the women are like, and they follow the husband in all matters. And, you know, you justify a lot of it, you know. You don't say, oh, he's abusive, you say, oh, he's really angry, he's got an anger problem. And the focus for a long time was on anger issues, send him to anger management, and let's stop him getting so angry. So to switch from that to realizing someone is abusive, yeah, it does take, to be honest, it just takes a little bit of, you know, educating yourself, stepping away from the situation a little bit. When I was in the refuge, I did a lot of reading. They had resources there. I also came across other books, and it was really wonderful to read these books. You know, wonderful in that all this stuff I thought I'd imagined, or all this stuff I'd dismissed, I was able to see, like, wow, this is that was actual abuse, and I just had to put up with it. And I took that as, you know, being okay, but that was abuse too. And you suddenly realize that, oh, none of that was my fault, you know. It was, you're free from any kind of fault in that. But when you're stuck in the marriage, perhaps you don't see that. So, you know, when I speak to these women, I basically tell them to read certain books, you know, look at these different resources, because they're full of information about the traits of an abuser, their behaviors, how they'll treat you. And when you're in an abusive marriage, you literally just got to read a page or two and you're like, yeah, yes, 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 yes. And it becomes super obvious. Wow, he's not just angry. I'm not just going crazy. This is not a healthy relationship. And yeah, I guess all of the stuff that you knew deep down was wrong about the marriage and should be better, is just gets made super clear when you read it in black and white.
That kind of hits at the cognitive dissonance in the situation, because knowing deep down that there's something going on is part of what I think drives many couples to try to stay and work through things, even in abusive situations. And so I know you mentioned that there's some books that you recommend, and I'm sure our listeners benefit if you wanted to list any titles. But then as well, that whole kind of next step of, should I stay? Is the relationship worth saving? Is there anything that can be done to save it? Or should I just go? That's kind of, I think, obviously the next question of where people go.
Yeah. I mean, yes, the resources, there's definitely a great book called Why Does He Do That? I can't remember the name of the author, but I'll make sure that I get it to you so that you can include it in the notes for the podcast. But yeah, it really helps open your eyes. And unfortunately, it also helps you to understand that abusers rarely change. You know, it's not saying that it's impossible that they'll change, but, you know, what an abuser does best is promise over and over and over again, I'll change, I'm not going to do that again. And it may well be that they go months without doing that thing again. And you can have this renewed hope and faith in your marriage that, oh, wow, he really learned after that last time, or he really learned after my parents, you know, jumped in and spoke to him. And you convince yourself that things are getting better. But you know, that cycle's always there in the background, and understanding that that cycle's there. And despite all of the promises of change, things are not changing. So when you can see that in black and white, and you can see your relationship for what it truly is, then there's no denying that I need to leave this person because they're not changing. And, you know, my ex even went on a perpetrator program, which was a 6-month program designed to help perpetrators of domestic abuse really, you know, see what they were doing and how their behavior was affecting their partners and the children. And he did it whilst we were separated, which is advised, you know, that's what's advised, to do it while they're not living with, you know, the person that they're abusing. And I got, you know, some good feedback from the people that were leading the course at the time, because they would feedback to me each week. And even my ex showed signs that he was like, wow, yeah, I didn't realize I was having this effect on the newborn baby. And, you know, it looked like he was taking it all in. But, you know, I mentioned before, we had like I had an 18-month period where I couldn't bring myself to make that decision. Should I stay and give it another shot, or should I go? But in, you know, allowing him to spend time around us, you know, more so because I had 2 young children and he couldn't see them if I didn't let him come to the family home and visit them. Like, we didn't have a relationship, but what I said to him is, come spend time with the family, and then when I feel comfortable enough, inshallah, we'll get back together. That was my intention, because I didn't want to break the family unit up. And I could see these positive signs that perhaps finally he's getting it now. But subhanAllah, spending that time around him when he was comfortable and relaxed and, you know, just free to be himself, there were just little moments here and there where he'd say something. And it was usually if we were talking to somebody that we didn't know very well, like, so if we were at an appointment, or, you know, we were just driving around in the car, he'd say something. And because I'd been reading up on domestic abuse, and I even read a really great checklist that lets you know, you know, how to know if your abuser has changed. And I'll share that too, because reading through that meant that when he said certain things or acted a certain way, I was like, that's a sign that he hasn't changed. He doesn't really get it. And abusers need to really get, you know, that nothing else is to blame for their behavior. And if they're not seeing that, it's the biggest alarm bell to just get out of that. And I saw stuff like that, and I knew then and there that the relationship itself was dead. I couldn't risk going back into an abusive relationship. But then, like you say, the whole decision about staying or going is plagued with then lots of other worries. It's like, okay, now I know that the relationship is dead and I can't stay married to this guy anymore, oh my gosh, now I have to break up the family. And there's so much fear around that. It's, you know, am I going to damage my kids? Are they going to grow up and resent me for making this decision? Am I going to regret my decision? What happens if a few years down the line I want to get me remarried again? Who's going to marry somebody with 2 kids? Like, all of this stuff pops up all of a sudden. You know, and how will I know for sure I'm making the right decision? So yeah, that can keep you stuck in limbo for a long time, because we're never going to know the unknown. You know, we can't base our decisions on stuff that hasn't happened in the future, that may not ever happen anyway. We've just got to look at what the situation is right now. Like, right now, the relationship is dead. So even though I've got no idea how things are going to work out in the future, that can't form part of that, you know, that can't form part of my decision. My decision has to be based on just the black and white of what is my relationship like today. And, you know, because of the abuse and everything, and I could see that he didn't really get it. And that was scary to me, because the reason I left in the first place on that day was because I couldn't ever trust that he wouldn't really hurt me the next time, and that, you know, maybe I wouldn't be around for my kids or something, or whatever. So yeah, I think from speaking to a lot of women who are in similar situations, one of the biggest problems they face is dealing with all of the fears about what's to come once they make that decision. They've basically created a made up story in their minds of how they believe their life is going to be if they leave, and they're scared of that story. So they stay stuck in limbo. And, you know, my job is to help them see that that story they've created is just that. It's a made up story. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen later on today, you know, in 5 minutes time, let alone years into the future. But we create these stories and we convince ourselves that these stories are true and that that is actually what's going to happen. But that's, you know, it's just made up. It's all made up. And we start living in that world rather than in, you know, reality. And it's really comforting to know that, you know, we can create all the made up stories we want. We can plan as much as we want for what we think's coming, but Allah is the best of planners. You know, it's our job to just assess the situation for what it is, take whatever step makes sense to us at the moment, and trust in Allah that things will work out.
Alhamdulillah, that is so true. You know, I'm thinking just back into when I was doing a little bit of studies on fiqh earlier this year, and the whole purpose of the Sharia in Islam is to do, it's kind of like the medical principles of do no harm. It's doing less harm. All of the rules and regulations in our religion are built around trying to cause the least amount of harm for people. When we're talking about abusive situations, we're talking about a situation that's bringing about harm. And this is the reason why in our religion divorce is a permissible thing. And I know there's a lot of stereotypes in Islam, cultural stuff that we were talking about that can really get in the way sometimes. But when we're able to free ourselves from some of those, honestly, predatory mindsets, I would say, boy, it really can give us some hope and open us up to, well, not just the reality of new perspective paradigm, the internal inside out paradigm, but additionally that mental trap like we were just talking about of what's going to happen next. Yeah. Well, so what? You're freeing yourself from a situation right now. I mean, that's kind of one of the whole goals of coaching that we talk about often is being present in the moment, right? Yeah. And that's kind of the definition of that situation. When you're focused, when your whole cognitive activity is on something other than the present, you're not present in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you when you dig a little deeper and understand why we feel it's so necessary to think about the future, figure it out, and figure out how we would deal with all of these made up situations that we've created. The reason, the real reason we're doing that is so that we'll feel okay. You know, if this happens in the future, then this is how I'll deal with it. Okay, right, I feel better. Okay, yeah, I don't mind taking that decision now. But if we can't figure out that made up scenario, then suddenly there's a lot of anxiety there. Well, I don't know how I would deal with that. I wouldn't be able to deal with it. Like, that would just be too much for me. If that happens, I'm going to feel this, you know, and it's all coming from, again, that innocent, you know, but incorrect belief about how we really work. You know, when you truly see that no matter what's happening, you're only ever going to feel your thinking in the moment, you're free, you know, like you said. So what, you know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Like, phrase that a different way. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Like, it's fine. Like, whatever happens, I'm only ever going to feel my thinking in the moment. And, you know, it's not dismissing that there will be challenging times, you know, there will be, but the blessing in that is that you'll only feel your own thinking during that. And the nature of thought is that it changes moment to moment to moment. So it's not this permanence that you fear, you know, when you don't have this understanding. Because if you truly believe that a certain situation happening in the future is going to cause your feelings, then that feels really permanent, and you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel with that. Because unless the situation changes, that's the only way you wouldn't then feel that horrible feeling that you're dreading. But when you know it comes from thought in the moment, it's so much more freeing, because thought changes moment to moment, you know, and when you know it's coming, when you know it's an inside job and it's only coming from the way you're thinking in the moment, you don't mind experiencing those, you know, I guess people call them negative feelings, but, you know, those types of feelings. You don't mind feeling sad. You don't mind feeling upset. You don't mind feeling, you know, anything, because you know it will pass. But there's no sense of that freedom when you truly believe that a certain situation in the made up future is going to cause you to feel a certain way. So yeah, that's there's a lot of that going on when we're stuck fearing stuff that will happen in the future, because what we're fearing, it's a fear of feelings. It's not that the thing will happen, because, you know, Allah blesses us with wisdom and insight in the moment. We can deal with, you know, any challenge that comes our way. What we're really fearing is the feelings that are going to come along with that. And that's what the inside out paradigm frees us, because it shows us that, hey, whatever happens, you're going to feel your thinking. You know, that thing has no power to cause you to feel anything.
So this kind of also answers a little bit of the question of what do we do in terms of moving on, moving forward, moving past the trials and tribulations of the broken relationships, divorce, separations. Because I mean, when we're thinking inversely about the past as opposed to thinking about the future, it's actually the exact same scenario, just the other way around. And in that moving forward stage, I mean, there's some issues there. I mean, if we're talking about single parenting, we've got maybe some child visitation issues that are going to happen. And there's going to be constant reminders that are going to come back, like triggers and stuff. How would you advise handling things like that?
It comes back to what you were just saying before about, you know, understanding more about the present moment, and that everything is happening in this present moment. So, you know, before I had this understanding about the inside out paradigm, I mentioned briefly before that there would be times where I'd have a really tough day. You know, I'd put the kids to bed, I'd come down, And I would just sit on the sofa and start crying. You know, life is so hard. When am I going to catch a break? You know, I've already been through so much. When is life going to get easier? And I would wallow in that pain. And then I would then think about all of the stuff that my ex did to me and all of the mistreatment I'd suffered. And I didn't deserve that. And poor me, poor me. And I would stay in that victim mode. And that would come up a lot because, hey, you know, with 2 kids, you're going to have a lot of tough days. You know, there's going to be a lot of challenges coming your way and you're responsible for a lot. And it can be quite exhausting. So with that unhelpful mindset I had, it meant that anytime I had a challenging day, it was very, very easy for me to sit there and think about all of the other hard stuff I'd been through in my life and wallow on that. But then the more I read about the nature of thought, and the more I read about the present moment and how we use thought in this moment to experience life, like we experience everything through thought in the moment, I suddenly became aware of the role that my thinking was playing in everything, and very aware of the fact that there is only this present moment. Like the past doesn't exist, you know. What past? The past was another present moment. You know, the future doesn't exist. It's just another present moment. You know, there is only this moment. You know, people will be like, well, then what are memories, and what are, you know, the past, the memories of the past come up and then it really affects me and I relive everything again. But what's really going on in that moment is that you're using thought in the present moment to think about something that happened in the past. And then depending on the way that you think about whatever happened in the past, because you feel what you think, you're going to feel all of that. So if I choose to reflect on something that happened to me in the past, and I'm thinking about it in a really, you know, upset way, oh, I can't believe that I had to go through that. I can't believe he treated me like that. Poor me, poor me. I'm going to feel all of that thinking. I'm going to start feeling really sorry for myself, really frustrated, really resentful. And it can, the illusion that happens in that moment is that I believe that what happened to me in the past is what's causing me to feel that way now. And in that illusion, suddenly I've given all the power to the past. That thing that happened in the past makes me feel this way. And then we're stuck. We can't go back and fix what happened. We have no power to do that. So innocently, we're keeping ourselves stuck. And we've kind of convinced ourselves that because this thing happened in the past, and because whenever I think about it, maybe most of the time I think about it in this upset, resentful way, and I feel all of that, it really looks as though that situation has this power over me. And every time I think about it, I feel this way. We don't see that it's actually fresh thought in this present moment that we're having that is causing us to feel that. And the difference that that makes is that when you realize this thought in the moment, and it's the way I'm thinking about it in this moment, when it pops up again, you know, when you catch your thinking going down that path again, you're like, oh no, I don't need to go down that path today. You know, you become aware of it, and you're so much better able to drop it and ignore it because you know what's going on. You're like, it's my own thinking right now that's taking me down that path. And guess what? I don't need to go down that path. Like the power is back with you. It's no longer with that incident that happened. And then when it comes up, it's like, oh, that incident. Oh, you know, you feel like it's got so much power over me. And look at how I feel now. That's no longer what's going on. And that realization is super powerful. And you are able to drop so much of the unhelpful thinking that you have about the past. And you don't need, like, the whole moving on from the past. I find that a strange way of wording it, because there's nothing like there, you know, to say to move on from the past, it's as though there's something there that you actually need to move on from, rather than it just being something that happened at a previous moment in time. And now we're experiencing another moment in time. Like there's nothing to move on from. It's just understanding that it happened in a previous moment, and the only time that I'm going to feel upset about it or angry about it or distraught about it is if I choose in this moment in time to think about it in that way. Like there is nothing to move on from. It is all comes back to just being super aware of the role your thinking plays in everything.
Subhanallah. That is an insight that I hadn't noticed before. But you're totally right. The statement is nonsensical. I mean, the past doesn't exist anymore. It's the past by definition. So to move from something that doesn't exist,
It's giving it
it's
even
impossible.
more power that it doesn't have, because then it's
Yeah.
telling us that there is something that you need to move on from.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? And it's like, well, no, there isn't. It's the only thing we, we can do to really help us in all areas of life is just really become aware of the role thought is playing in our lives. It's not something that we're taught at school. It's not something that, obviously there's so much out there in terms of self-development, but it's very much about changing your thoughts and managing your thoughts and not actually understanding the role of thought itself. When you understand the role of thought itself, you don't need to change anything. You become way more accepting of all the types of different emotions, the whole range. It doesn't, like, I don't mind if I feel sad, I don't mind if I get frustrated, if I get angry, okay, yeah, it's not the most pleasant emotion to experience, but I know it's coming from the way I'm thinking in the moment. And when you know that, you experience things much differently. There's a lot more freedom there and a lot less burden and suffering.
Subhanallah. It's beautiful. So in terms of working with children in divorce situations or separations, there's this question of, okay, we can come to grips with this now. We can accept the paradigm of reality, and find healing and transformation and grow with the insights that come along the way. But how do we address things with kids? I mean, sometimes they're going to be so young, first couple of years, they may not even remember it when they're older. Others, maybe they're going to be 8, 9, 12, 15, and maybe they've experienced some of the abuse themselves. How can we help them in situations?
I think the most beneficial thing that we can do once we're able to see situations really clearly, when we're able to see situations without our feelings riding on them, then it becomes a lot easier to help other people see the situation for what it is. And for example, with my son, my eldest, he's 8 now, and similar to what I was saying to you before, where you see the issue, and there's definitely an issue there, and we're not dismissing that there's an issue. Like, if my son gets upset about something, I'm not going to minimize his feelings. Like, you're totally okay to feel all of that. I know it's coming from his thought in the moment, but what I'll do is I focus my energy on helping him see the issue for what it really is, and just understanding that, and not, I guess, what would have been my go-to before, which would be trying to make him feel better and say anything I can to get him to stop crying and to get him to feel better. And so maybe that would be helpful temporarily, but maybe not as helpful long-term. So now it's very much focused on the truth of the situation. Okay, well, this happened. It wasn't, it wasn't great. It's not okay. But unfortunately, whatever the situation is, it's, very much like speaking to an adult and just letting them know that this is what the world is like and this is what people are like. And that doesn't mean that it's okay. And, we don't have to be okay with that kind of treatment. And that's not how we want to live our lives. That's not how Allah wants us to be. But unfortunately, some people, they don't follow what I don't follow how Allah wants us to be. And it's very much focusing on just truth and, you know, how things work, how they don't work. And I know that he'll be okay. I know that as soon as his thinking changes, he'll feel okay. And you've probably seen it yourself in kids, like they can be having a full-on meltdown. And then, you know, especially the younger kids, and then literally in 1 second, they're bouncing around super happy. And it's like, wow, you know, you literally went from having a crazy tantrum and now you're super happy. And it's in those moments that you see the nature of thought change so quickly. Like obviously with older children, you know, maybe they're not going to have such a crazy change, but the blessing is that in knowing I don't need to, it's not my responsibility to make them feel better. I don't have that power anyway. All I can do is help them see the truth of the situation, help them understand that, you know, help them become aware of any limited thinking that they might be having about it, any unhelpful thinking that they might be having, pointing out what's true about the way they're thinking and what's not true, just helping them to just see the situation as clearly as possible. And then that way they're thinking, you know, any unhelpful thinking that they've had about it will, inshallah, fall away.
Inshallah. And Ptissem, I don't know if you've noticed this at all in working with kids. And I don't know if you do any work with kids other than with your own, but one thing that I've at least kind of caught on to is the fact that, you know, these kids, they're still in their fitra often. I mean, to a certain age at least. So it's almost actually easier for them to understand and accept the inside out paradigm, truths of reality, because they're already so innately connected to it.
Yeah 100%. And you know, I don't actually work with other children, just, you know, just my own, but when you're in a good place, you know, when you can see things as clearly as possible, when you're clear on how things work and how they don't psychologically, when you're just in a good emotional state, it becomes very easy to help other people, you know, because you're seeing things super clearly. If I didn't have this understanding and my child was super upset about something and like super mixed up and, you know, finding something really challenging, there will probably be a big part of me that wants him to, you know, get over it and get better so that I can feel better. You know, that's what's driving the kind of, oh, you know, I need to help him so that he can be better and then I can be better. And that's not how it works either. You know, I'm going to feel whatever I think in the moment. That's where my feelings come from, not from him being better. Like, I still want my son to be better, but it's coming from a very different place. There's no, you know, what's the word? There's nothing riding on it. Like, I don't need him to be better so that I can feel better. I just want him to see the situation as clearly as possible for his own well-being.
Alhamdulillah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that all of us can take away, regardless of whether we're a single parent or not, is that if we're trying to change someone, we're kind of falling back into that illusion.
Yeah.
We're trying to get something out of them. It's going back into the nafs, going back into the self, going back into that whole illusion of how we could get some maybe temporary result and feel better in the moment from something external. Yeah.
It's no longer really about the other person. I mean, it kind of is, but really it is about you too, you know. And that's not the best place to come from when you're trying to help other people, or when you're trying to resolve anything. If it's all so that you can feel better, so that you can have things your way because you believe that once you do, you'll feel okay, then yeah, it's going to be a pretty tough journey.
Yeah, I find this particularly helpful in, like, I think the earlier stages when you're talking back at just analyzing the relationship from the first part. Maybe there's not abuse, but you're maybe nitpicky about certain things, maybe character or temperament issues that aren't matching up as what you expected. Maybe it's a new couple that are still trying to get used to each other and they're getting into arguments all the time. Being able to recognize that, well, this other person or the situation isn't the cause of my feelings, and stopping the thinking and then also then the action of trying to change that other person or situation.
Yeah.
I can go so far in mending a relationship.
Yeah, 100%. Because a lot of the times, and may have mentioned it before, we're sat there discussing things with our partner, trying to resolve things, but really what we're mostly trying to resolve is how we feel. And that's not how it works. You can't resolve that. Nothing that anyone can say or do can make you feel anything beyond, like, in that moment you may have, someone may say something to you or do something to show that they're sorry for their behavior, and in that moment you may have a different way of thinking, and you may feel temporarily better because you've had a change in thinking, but it had nothing to do with what they did or what they said. Likewise, when things are not great and there are issues that you need to figure out at home, having that added layer of that that illusion that you need them to do something so that you can feel better, or he needs to stop doing this so and then I'll feel better. It's like that result will never be achieved. It's a unrealistic expectation, and a lot of people do this innocently because they're living in this outside in illusion that something other than thought in the moment is what gives us our feelings. So yeah, I need my husband to do this, and 100% he needs to stop doing that, because then it seems it's very convincing that once those things are done or not done, I'm going to feel better. So those expectations can get really out of hand because we're very much living in that illusion, and the inside out helps us to see through all of that. And yeah, like I said, it doesn't diminish that sometimes there are things that need to change. Sometimes, out of respect for each other, you do need to put certain things in place. Sometimes all that really needs to happen is for you to see through your own expectations and realize that they are unrealistic, realize that they're not ever going to make you feel content and happy, even though you've convinced yourself that that's the case, and that you're always going to feel thought in the moment. So when you know that that's where your feelings are really coming from, suddenly so many expectations drop. I hear from a lot of women, they say, oh, why doesn't my husband wake me up for Fajr? If he really loved me, he'd wake me up. And I say to them, can you wake yourself up for Fajr? Like, that your husband waking you up, like, you've created this rule in your head that if my husband wakes me up for Fajr, that means he loves me. If he doesn't, that means he doesn't love me. But it's a totally made up rule. Like, your husband could be showing you love in so many other ways, but you're not seeing them. Your super layers are focused on this one thing that you've made up in your mind, and you believe that once it happens, then I'll feel happy. And that becomes the focus of a lot of disappointment, a lot of resentment, when really it's not even an issue. You could wake your own self up. If your husband is up and he wakes you up, great. If alhamdulillah, but it's not an indication of how much he loves you or not. Like, being able to just kind of open things up and really see that person and what they're doing that you may not have noticed, to show you that they love you, instead of getting super laser focused on this rule that we've created and we have attached our feelings to it. Like, this has to happen for me to feel happy and to feel happy with my husband. There's a lot of that unconscious behavior going on, a lot of these unrealistic expectations, and they're all tied to this incorrect belief that we innocently live by, that once that stuff happens, once he does all of this, then I'll feel better, then I'll feel happy, and then we'll have a great marriage. And it doesn't work that way.
Mashallah, that is absolutely excellent in terms of how we can move forward, I think, because this isn't just something that we can use in our day-to-day relationships. It's something we can go out and take with us in every moment of our life.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the inside out paradigm, being able to live in the present is that we're able to now move forward with strength and confidence. We can look at these situations and no longer be judging other people. We can take better responsibility for our own actions.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. And the more you learn about this, the more you listen to this truth, the more you surround yourself with this truth, the more and more you see it show up in so many areas of life. And as you see it show up and you have these insights, these new ways of thinking, these new ways of seeing things, you evolve. Like, life just gets better. You're just so much more aware of yourself, and your relationships improve. So yeah, the more you surround yourself with truth, the more it shows up in your life and makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Alhamdulillah. So Ptissem, I know you've been coaching for about 3 years now. During that time, how have you grown as a person in terms of any insights that you've attained during the coaching process or through the coaching process?
I think what's been wonderful is, having this understanding myself and then coaching people that are new to this understanding. And, they're all facing different challenges, and those challenges weigh really heavy on them. And then the more that they understand this inside out paradigm, the more they understand themselves and start seeing the role that their thinking is playing in everything, so many of their challenges fall away, and things that they didn't even expect to improve, as I was saying with my own journey. And it's really wonderful to constantly be reminded of the blessing that Allah has given us in the way that we already work. Like, we can make life so much more difficult for ourselves, and we do it innocently because, through no fault of our own, we've just been conditioned to believe life works a certain way. And this understanding just really helps us to see how we already work, how we already, how Allah already created us. And there's so much mercy in that. So it's really wonderful in coaching sessions to have people see this truth for themselves and no longer emotionally suffer through so much. Just that constant reminder that Allah has made it easy for us. Allah has blessed us with the way that we already work. And that, hey, we don't need to do all of this stuff anymore or suffer through all of these unhelpful thoughts that we have anymore, because it doesn't work that way. We're way more in tune with how we're already created and how we already work. And it's so wonderful to come back to that place and to see clients come back to that place over and over again. Yeah, it's a lovely reminder of Allah's mercy.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. That's absolutely amazing. And I hope you have continued success in your coaching. I also want to grant you ease and success in that, inshallah.
And with you too, inshallah.
Where do you see the journey taking you in the future?
I 100% want to continue getting this understanding out to as many people as possible. It really is life-changing. Don't say those words lightly. It transforms the way you think about yourself, about your life. It really enriches your life in so many ways. So, every day I go onto social media and I'll see people kind of express what they're finding challenging, or, you know, complain about stuff that's weighing really heavily on them. And I'm like, oh, if only you knew that that's just thought in the moment. If only you were able to see that it doesn't have to be that difficult. So for me, you know, this is such a simple but powerful solution for so many people that I want to make it as easy as possible to, you know, get people interested in learning about this, you know, for their benefit and for all our benefits, inshallah. So yeah, I'm 100% going to continue. I'm in the process of creating coaching, like coaching programs, more specifically an online training program, so that people that can't physically take part in you know, one-on-one or group coaching can have somewhere where they can study themselves online and get a, you know, a really good sense of what the inside out paradigm is all about and how it can specifically really help them in their relationships. So that's something that I'm working on at the moment. It's not quite ready yet, but it will be soon. And if any of your listeners are interested, they can go to ptissem.com/free. They'll get a short video training for free, but then more importantly, they'll be on my email list. So as soon as that program is available, they'll be the first to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely check out Ptissem's website, and definitely subscribe. You know, that was one of the things that we both had common with our teacher Mamoon, was that we'd been subscribing to his email for years or so.
Yeah, I think probably 10 years before I actually,
wow,
you
mashallah,
plunged and signed up for something.
Yeah, and you know, the gems that come out from someone who's connected to this perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, Mamoon knows his marketing skills for one, but just the little insights that he'll pop in there every now and then, even just paying attention to that sort of thing. I know I have an email subscription. You've got yours, which is awesome too. So yeah, connecting to that sort of stuff. If you're not able to jump into a further relationship than that, connecting on that small level is a brilliant thing that I have to encourage anyone to do. I mean, that's often something that we just like, I don't want to subscribe to another list or stuff, but those are probably some of the most important decisions that you'll make in your life.
Yeah, you're listening to truth, you're reading truth, you're looking in the direction of how things really work when it comes to your psychology and your spirituality. And by spending time reading that or listening to that or surrounding yourself with more of that, you're way less likely to get caught up in the way it doesn't work, which makes life a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of truths, you know, one of the things I like to ask all of our guests here on Sober Awakenings is if you have a favorite ayat or maybe hadith that has stood out to you along your journey.
I absolutely love the hadith of the man who went up to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and asked him, should I tie my camel and trust in Allah, or should I leave it loose and trust in Allah? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, told him to tie his camel and then trust in Allah. And I love that a lot because, you know, I know what it's like to be stuck in a really difficult situation where you can't see a way out and you're really down on yourself and telling yourself, oh, well, bad stuff always happens to me and this is just, I have no luck in life. And to almost wait for something magical to happen to change your situation for you. And then when it doesn't happen, you know, you beat yourself up even more that, you know, you've got a really rubbish life. And what I love about this hadith is that it reminds us that we need to take action too, and then trust in Allah. Instead of just sitting there and hoping that things change and things improve, we can do things for ourselves. We can take that first step to change things for ourselves. For me, it was against all logistical odds, getting me and my 2 children to London, taking part in this event, signing up to a year-long coaching program when I was broke. I was broke as a joke. But where there's a will, there's a way. And, I spoke to Mamoon, and we figured out a payment plan, and I knew that this was good for me. And alhamdulillah, it was. I took that step myself, and then I trusted in Allah, and Allah guided me and showed me the way to go. And alhamdulillah, it all worked out well. But had I stayed at home and just hoped and prayed that things would get better, yeah, maybe they would. But what's amazing about getting up and taking that step yourself is that you live differently. You realize that you can change things yourself. You can improve things yourself, and it goes hand in hand with trusting in Allah, where we do have that power to change our lives. And it all starts with, one small step. Don't want to sound like Neil Armstrong, but yeah, it does. It just starts with realizing that, yeah, we need to do something. We need to take action ourselves, and then trust in Allah afterwards.
Alhamdulillah. That's a beautiful hadith. My local imam here, it's been one of his go-tos during the coronavirus pandemic here lately, that he's just been saying is, hey, look, this is what we got to do. We got to tie the camel, trust in Allah.
Exactly.
Take these actions that are going to be appropriate for the safety of our community, and just make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide us through it. And this is a truth, a true jewel and a gem from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we indeed can apply to current situations, as well as issues like we discussed here today in terms of abuse, divorce, those interpersonal relational issues that are very sensitive and often challenging.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful reminder that we don't need to have everything figured out. As long as we take the action that makes sense to us in this moment, that we know will be, good for us, inshallah, because it makes sense to us to take that step. Like you said, the precautions with the coronavirus, we know what steps there are to take ourselves, but we don't need to figure everything else out. We don't need to know what's going to happen in the future and how we're going to deal with it and what we're going to do if this happens or what we'll do if that happens. We don't need to figure any of that out. That's where the trust part comes, and trusting not only in Allah's power to, help us through these situations, but also in the insight and wisdom that Allah blesses us with to deal with whatever is going to come our way, and trusting that in any given moment, you'll know how to deal with things in the future. So I don't have to figure it all out now. I'll figure it out when it happens.
Alhamdulillah. Ptissem, thank you for joining us here today on Sober Awakenings.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Please check out Ptissem's coaching, her website, ptissem.com, as well as subscribing to her email newsletter.
Thank you. I look forward to connecting with some of your listeners, inshallah. And thank you again for having me. It's been a great conversation, mashallah.
You've been listening to Sober Awakenings. Special thanks to Ptissem Abourachid for her insights into these integral aspects of recovery. In the words of Malcolm, once you change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Once you change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. Once you change your attitude, it changes your behavior pattern, and then you go on into some action. I love this part in the interview I had with Ptissem where we reflected on the fact that it is impossible to fix something in the past because the past simply no longer exists. The present moment is all that each of us has, and awakening to the potential presence holds is what coaching is all about. I hope that this episode has helped shift your perspective on abuse. If you are struggling and need help, Ptissem and I, as well as many other qualified professionals, are here for you. And know that Allah does not burden us with more than we can bear. Alhamdulillah. You can connect with Ptissem at her website, ptissem.com, or by email at ptissem@ptissem.com. She also has a presence on Facebook and Instagram, so you can follow her there. The book, Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft, that she mentioned in this interview, as well as a helpful checklist to know if an abuser is changing, can be found in the show notes for this episode. We are still working to make new episodes of Sober Awakenings available for you each month. Special thanks to Zoom for facilitating again as the virtual recording studio. This episode was recorded on Zoom. Music was by Sound the Encounter, and our guest today was Ptissem Abourachid. Sober Awakenings is a production of the Sukina method of recovery, and I am your coach, Tim Brennecke. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.